but if he does, in due course, I guess he will identify himself and we'll ask him to join us here at the top of the room. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on the topic of facilitating access to finance for high-growth innovative enterprises. This is the first of two parallel sessions in the thematic analysis stream. The other two parallel sessions ongoing at the moment are on technology transfer and smart specialization. So my name is James Gavigan. I work for the Joint Research Centre, the unit dealing with knowledge for finance, innovation and growth. And maybe just by way of some initial remarks, I think it's fair to say that governments have been paying attention to the potential impact of high-growth innovative firms in terms of generating employment and economic growth for a number of years. And I guess we've all heard of the often cited examples of the gazelles and the unicorns. And even if those are exceptions, it is also true that the totality of high-growth innovative enterprises does represent a small and clearly a poorly defined proportion of the enterprise population in any economy. And these firms do nonetheless tend to be young and are not necessarily small, and I think they're found across all sectors, and high growth is often episodic and short-lived. And there are many factors that play a role in the emergence of such high growth episodes: innovation, network economies, managerial capabilities, worker skills, and also global linkages. All of these contribute. But in this session, we want to shed particular light on the issues surrounding the ease of access to finance, both from the perspective of the day-to-day reality that businesses face, entrepreneurs face in dealing with this, but also from the point of view of public policies that are directed at such matters. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the panelists have to say, to the discussion that ensues, and certainly from our perspective in the Joint Research Centre, where this is an ongoing research topic for us, I'm looking forward to picking up on some further insights that will influence the work that we're doing and that feeds into the policy processes at EU level that we advise and provide science-based advice to, and in particular input that's provided to the annual economic governance cycle that goes under the label of the European semester. But before telling you how this session will unfold, I do want to introduce our panelists. So we have Mihai Darzan. He's chief executive of the Ringel team, a software company that develops power and gas supply and trading management platforms. And Mihai's company, I think, caters for about half of the power suppliers and 20% of the active gas suppliers in Romania. And he's also expanded to Serbia and is planning to cover new countries. So welcome, Mihai. We have also Sergiu Negut. Sergio, co-founder and board director of FinTech, which is a venture capital-backed, fast-growing company. Sergio has also got broader experience as a business angel. He teaches strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship at the Maastricht School of Management, and he's also board member of Romanian Business Leaders. And Sergio has also been responsible as executive for the expansion of the privately owned Regina Maria healthcare network in Romania. And he has an MBA from INSEAD and undergraduate degrees in computer science and international business.
This university.
The next on my list, I don't know if he's entered the room, Luigi Amati. If not, I'll skip over him. He's our missing panelist for the moment. I then come to Andrea Brasili, senior economist at the EIB, but also with a long experience in the private sector. So Andrea has worked as economist in the asset management industry, UniCredit, Pioneer Investment, Amundi, and his analysis ranges from microdata in the corporate sector to macroeconomic analysis and forecast. And Andrea joined the IB's Economic Studies Division in May 2018, and his work focuses mainly on the analysis of the dynamics of investment and market failures in providing and financing investment. And finally, we have Rudi Ehrnaut, I've got that correctly, who is Professor of Corporate Finance and Enterprise Policy at the University of Ghent, but also visiting professor at the University of Nancy, Master in Economy, Thomistic Philosophy, and let me continue, and also European Economics. He has been Chief of Staff at European federal and regional level. He has been Credit Manager at ING, Secretary General of the Department of Economics and Innovation, and CEO and CFO of One Laptop Per Child, an MIT spin-off. And he has authored several books and papers on corporate finance, and his handbook, Financial Management in Practice, is widely used in academia and in business. And he's also co-founded EBAN, the European Business Angels Network, and is a founder of the Foundation for the Research on Education and Entrepreneurship. And finally, my colleague Aurélien Gentil. He's a policy officer in the same unit as myself in the Joint Research Centre, and he leads a team on productivity and macroeconomic modelling. And he's been with the Commission since 2008 and has had different positions in the JRC and in the Director General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. And he has worked prior to the Commission for the EDF and the French National Institute for Industrial Environment and Risks, and has a PhD from the Sorbonne. And I guess we've been joined finally by our final panelists, so let me reverse back just to make the final introduction. Luigi, am I correct? Luigi Matti. Luigi is chairman of Business Angels Europe, with expertise in research, innovation and venture capital over more than 25 years. He started as a researcher and has also founded his own company, Meta Group, which through various divisions provides entrepreneurial training to research startups, advises regional and local governments on innovation policy, and manages several investment funds. So Luigi has also been a founder member of the Italian Angels for Growth, the largest angel group in Italy, and as I said at the start, is chairman of Business Angels Europe. So you see we've got a panel with top credentials for the topic of this discussion. What I propose to do now is just tell you how we intend to unfold. We have about 75 minutes. We will start with a presentation by Aurélien, who will set the scene and highlight some of the findings of the ongoing JRC research work that I've referred to. And once Aurélien has finished his presentation, I propose to go immediately into a session where we will get opening statements from each of the panelists, and we will start with our two Romanian business representatives to give us a very practical focus to the discussion. And then after the opening statements, we will maybe navigate through the discussion according to what emerges in the opening statements, and we will also open the discussion to the audience. So if anybody at any stage, once the discussion starts, wants to chime in, please just raise your hand or something like that. I mean, we're in a relatively small here setting, so it should be easy and conducive to interactive discussion. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Aurélien to kickstart the process and walk us through his presentation.
Okay, so hello everybody. I will present you the work that we have carried out over the last 2-3 years in the JRC, and we are still working on it. So it's, I would say, an ongoing process. And this project is about high growth, innovative enterprises. And in particular, the access to finance for this type of company. So let me first explain to you why we are focused on high-growth innovative enterprises. So I put two different colors, and there is a reason. It's because high-growth and innovative is not the same thing at all, and sometimes is even going in the opposite direction. Is what we can find in the literature. So high-growth, first of all, I would like to emphasize that there is no common agreed definition. And that's the main issue for us. If you go to Eurostat or if you go to OECD, they have different, I would say, characteristics in terms of threshold, in terms of variable that we are measuring. And this is an issue. And this is just two, I would say, statistical offices. But in the literature, that's even more, I would say. And so there is plenty of definition. It could be, for instance, a company which grew over the last 3 years in terms of employment of 20%. This is the definition done, or given by OECD. But this is one example. And you need really to be aware that this variety of definition is a problem when you want to analyze the problem from a scientific point of view. A second thing is innovative. I would say that's even worse. Because even for high growth, we can set some metrics. We can say, okay, I take this variable. I take, for instance, sales. I put a threshold and I say, I measure it over the number of years I want to analyze it. And I can have a quantitative analysis if I make the effort. But for innovative, now you have to distinguish a company which is innovative from another one which is not innovative. So we have some definition given by, for instance, the Oslo manual, but it just gives you some guidelines. And at the end of the day, it's very tricky to define an innovative enterprise. So what is generally done in the literature is, as a proxy, we say that this company belongs to a certain sector which is supposedly innovative. So this is, as you can imagine, a shortcut which is very, we say, coarse, because I mean, you can be an innovative sector, but your company is not innovative, and the other way around. You can be in non-innovative sector, but your company is very innovative. So in this research, what we have defined as high-growth innovative enterprises at the end of the day is a company which are young company, which are quite innovative, and most importantly, which have some growth potential, whatever is this potential. But compared to the other, I would say, companies, they have some very good perspective. Now, if you look at this company, they are quite different from the other set of company. In fact, if you look at the problem and the concern that a company have, and in particular SMEs, for instance, if you look at the last barometer from the ECB, you will see that access to finance is not at all the main concern. It's even the least most important concern. They have more concern with, for instance, professional skills or regulation. But for high-growth innovative enterprises, access to finance is a key issue. In particular for companies which are not at the frontier. And this is what we found in the literature, and this is why we are focused on this issue in particular. Now, what we have done so far, we have mapped the different policy instruments in Europe, country by country, which try to help this company for access to finance. And so this is just a first step, because the most important thing for us was to analyze the performance of this policy instrument. So we have analyzed different things. So we have analyzed the effectiveness. So this tool policy instrument try to ease access to finance. So are they successful? But what is even more important, because what we want to have is high-growth innovative enterprises which grow. So we want to see if they have contributed in terms of sales, in terms of employment, in terms of innovation. And I think it's even more important than the effectiveness. So how we do it now? Let me just focus on that. What I wanted to highlight here is just a source of funding that SME can have. So on the very left-hand side, you have the most, I would say, the easiest way, which is own resources, which is internal resources. This is the cheapest in general, the easiest way to do. But the problem is when you are SMEs, and in particular a startup, you don't have any own resource. So you have to go to external sources of funding. Now you have different options. The first one is financial instrument. I will come in more detail. And then you have other type, which are grants, for instance, and subsidies, and even another type, which is tax incentive. So the policy action, in fact, can, of course, be on tax incentive, because it is a responsibility of the state. Also in grants, because they are offering grants and subsidies. But even more important, I would say, public action can also help financial instruments. And I will show you. So this is the range of policy action. Now, I just want to explain a bit the framework. So I'll tell you, we have tried to identify, in fact, some, in the literature, some analysis which analyze the performance of the different policy instruments. To do that, it's not easy, to be honest, because there is little literature in terms of evaluation of policy instruments. In the best case, what we would like to do is to have a bunch of academic studies, evaluation, on which we can base a model and make a meta-analysis. That will be the ideal case. So for that, you will need also the raw data of the different evaluation. You pull that in a model, and then you can analyze many parameters which influence the performance of your tool. But there is no such data available in the literature. So we have to do in a different way. And to do that, so we do what is called an evaluation synthesis. So it's not a quantitative analysis, it's a qualitative analysis, where you collect some data based on a scientific approach, and you analyze in depth with some criteria the study, and then you can draw some general conclusion. So this is the main, I would say, the main idea. So it's in our work, we don't produce any new data. We are using the data which are available, either in the academic paper or also in the policy evaluation. Now, I told you, we have three types of tools that policy can work out, I would say. So the first one is financial instruments. So you know there is two main types of financial instruments. The first one is debt. So everybody in this room knows, because when you want, for instance, a mortgage, you need, when you want to buy a house, you need a mortgage. So you need a loan from the bank. But the problem with an SME and a young innovative company is bank doesn't want to lend them because they don't have collateral. They don't have the capacity, to show to the bank that they are able to reimburse the loan. So the other option is to go for equity. So you have different type of equity, and is where we want to focus in the analysis. So you have venture capital, you have fund of funds, you have also some guarantees. In any case, the thing is, in that case, the company give a share of the company to the investor. And this is the main point. So there is a loss of control, but in exchange, they get some funding. As we are pressed by time, I don't want to enter into this detail. But what I want to say about equity in general in Europe, you have different class, I would say, of countries. And some are more advanced than others. So UK is really the leading country in Europe. They have been doing this policy support to venture capital for more than 2 decades. So they are really the pioneer. They have first invested publicly in some venture capital. And now they have different options, which is more indirect. So in the case of venture capital, you don't set up a public venture capital, but you invest in some funds, which are private, and you have, in that way, a leverage effect. So you have UK, then you have also France and Germany, which are also very advanced in terms of policy support to venture capital. You have also another set of countries that we cannot see much on the map, but okay. So you have, for instance, Austria or the Netherlands. Then on the other part, so the Eastern and Central Europe country, they are catching up, I would say. So there is a move. So the venture capital is now supported also by public action, public intervention, and is not as developed as in the UK, of course. But there are some good examples. You have also to know that in some other countries, we simply do not have any evaluation. As I said before, there is really limited information available. So for instance, in Italy or in Spain, we couldn't find any evaluation. Now, what we have found when you analyze the equity instrument is when they are publicly supported, there is, I would say, a huge impact on employment, turnover, a bit less on innovation. But even more important, we have found a number of lessons, because not all policy support is equivalent to the other. So for instance, we have found that syndication of funds, so what I've explained before, where the policy actor invest in some funds, or they trigger some syndication, so some different investors together to invest, it's much more powerful. The second thing what we have found is when you, in publicly support, it's very important that you have some targeted tool. And in particular, public action have a very important effect when it is at early stage, but also at scale up, at growth stage. Also, what is important, so when a venture capital intervene, they provide fund, but not only fund. And they provide expertise, they provide some coaching, some networking, and this is as much important as the fund itself. Also, what we have found is the fund manager needs also to be skilled, because I told you, if you are a public actor and you just try to invest to set up your venture capital, if you are not skilled to do it, there is a good chance that you will fail. And it's what we found also in the literature. So you really need to have very skilled fund manager. Also, the tool so you apply really needs to have some flexibility. So you cannot focus only on a single region or even a country. It's much more impactful when you have a broader coverage. So you allow your tool to have a broader coverage. Also, you need to imagine that this fund needs critical mass. So this was the bigger, the better. Of course, it's a very risky activity, and you need to be patient to have some return. So you cannot hope that you will get your return in the next coming months. Oh, okay, sorry. Now I have to, so it's better now in the micro, but the room is small, this is why I was not talking in the micro. Now, about grants. So you have different grants. You have some generic one, no targeted at all, or on the contrary, you have some grants which target, in particular, innovative firms, or at least some company which have some, I will say, innovative activities. Again, you have some grants which focus only on one single beneficiary, or, on the contrary, on a group of beneficiaries. This is the case, for instance, for Horizon 2020. Horizon Europe, you are obliged to have a consortium, in general. For instance, you have also some single grants, so you give an amount, and that's it. Or, on the contrary, you say, okay, I give you this amount, and when you achieve this objective, I will give another amount. So you have different phases, and depending on the objective achieved, then you get the next phase of funding. What we found is, in general, the more targeted it is, the better. Second thing is also the milestone approach is much better. Of course, I mean, if you invest in a company and give all at the beginning, there is a high chance that it will fail, because we are talking about innovative company at the early phase. So if you put your money with some milestones, you remove also the risk. What is important is the signaling effect, because when policy intervention signal out, I have funded this company then, in the next phase, can go to venture capital and say, look guys, I have been funded by public support, they trusted me, and you can then trust me for the next round of funding. And there is also a very positive effect. And as I said before, you need also some, it's like I said for the other type of equity, for instance, you have some complementary services. So coaching, this kind of thing is very important. Now, just the last one, about tax incentives. There is plenty of tax incentive in Europe. As you can see on the map, in fact, almost all member states, except 3, doesn't have this tax incentive, well, for R&D. The notable exception is Germany. But if you can see, almost all. So 25 out of 28 member states. Some have some very targeted schemes. So they really try to target high-growth firms or innovative firms by some simple criteria like age. So for instance, you target young firms, or by size, you target SMEs, for instance. While some others have some general schemes. So they just have a tax incentive, and you just need to apply. So it's very varied, I would say, across Europe. So you have these 3 types of intervention or not, I would say. What we found is tax incentive is not very effective, at least for the purpose we are looking for, so the support of high-growth innovative enterprises. The second thing is, again, the more targeted, the better. And also what is interesting to know is tax incentive works together with grants. So for instance, if you have a scheme with some grants and you also provide some tax incentive, it provides some additional impact. Now, I just want to emphasize a few things. So access to finance is problematic only for a subcategory of firms. So it's not the majority of firms you have to be aware of. So high-growth innovative enterprises, depending on how you define it, it could be from 0.1% of all SME, or of all companies, to 10%. So the range could be very large. So we are talking about another 2 orders of magnitude, depending on the definition. But what is important to know is these high-growth innovative enterprises, they have different needs compared to the others. They contribute much to the growth in terms of jobs, in terms of growth, output, much more than any other company. We have some figures. So, I mean, when you are looking at the new jobs created, for instance, high-growth innovative companies are responsible for more than half. Even if the share in the economy is quite limited, in terms of contribution is enormous. And now, what is really critical for them at the end of the day is maybe not the early stage, is also what we found, but this is the next step. Because, of course, the early stage, you have a lot of failures. So you have been said this morning that in Romania, for instance, 90% of SME are gone after 1 year. But when you have a startup which have succeeded to survive, the scale-up is really a big, big issue. Because venture capital, in general, they prefer to intervene later, while the public support, as I told you before, they apply rather at early stage. So you have a funding gap, and this is very key for them to grow and to have access to fund. The second thing is, in fact, the story is really a long series of steps, from startup to grow to maybe become one day a unicorn. And you have a funding escalator, you have plenty of measures, you need a portfolio of measures, going from loans, even, to venture capital, to grants, to subsidies, and also regulation which support your innovative enterprises. And last thing I would like to emphasize is you need some targeted measures. You cannot expect that if you just build a policy tool, policy instrument, completely generic, it will work. If we want really high-growth innovative enterprises grow, then you need to have a tool which really targets them. And I told you, it's quite difficult to define them. You would only know ex post, because it's just a bet on the future. You don't know how they will grow. So you need some simple criterion to define them, but you need absolutely to target your measure.
Thank you very much, Aurélien. Okay, I want now to turn to the panel. You've heard from Aurélien more or less the sort of systematic research type of angle or approach that the JRC follows with the name of now trying to inform policy. But I think, you know, what we have here today is the possibility of, if you like, to do a reality check and test with the people that are actually at the coalface of actually doing and trying to develop innovative business or facilitate much more directly this type of business than, say, we are, what is actually the reality like. So I want to ask Mihai to kick us off and maybe to give us his experience in what he sees are the do's and don'ts, what works, what doesn't work, and maybe from this we can pick up some messages for ourselves.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'm going to introduce you to what we're doing so you understand the steps that we made in a better way. So as mentioned in the presentation about me, we are doing software for power and gas companies, and we are helping them manage their business from end to end, 360 degrees, making their business more efficient and also more competitive. Given the fact that what we're doing, we are here in Romania working with 50% of the active power suppliers and 20% of the natural gas suppliers. Last year we entered into Serbia, and this year we established presence in Brussels. Our plan for the next 5 years is to grow throughout Europe to become one of the relevant players in the industry of software for utilities. And in order to do that, because we're targeting clients that are dependent on regulations, we have to do several things. For example, we need to grow our team, we need to make better and more sales and marketing actions, but also we need to adjust our platforms in order to scale faster and attract partners, implementation partners that are going to implement on top of our platform for new countries, new markets, new modules, and so on. In order to do that in a time span of 5 years, we cannot do it organically, so we need finance. So we started looking at financing options. The first option that we looked at was bank loans. So to our surprise, the bank actually chased us to give us loans, and we obtained a line of credit of 200,000 euros. So that was very easy for us. The second thing that we looked at was VCs and private equity. We pitched to several VCs, and we got 3 main objections that generally came together. So the first objection was the fact that we were looking for too small amount of money for them to be interested. The second objection was the fact that our projected growth for the next 5 years was too small compared to their expectations. And the third and the most important one was the fact, as previously I said, we are targeting clients that activate in regulated markets, so this is seen as risk towards our potential growth in the future. Another financing option that we looked at is quasi-equity, and we already are in the due diligence phase. We're not one of the providers of quasi-equity in Europe, so also that's checked. And the final option that we took into account was grants from Horizon 2020, SME Instrument Phase 2. This fits very good for us, and it's the most appealing financing option that we looked at, but it's also one of the hardest, in our opinion, to obtain funds from. And the reason for that are as follows, from our opinion. The first of all, in this part of Europe, it's almost the experience in obtaining grants from Horizon 2020, it's virtually inexistent or very low. For example, if you look at statistics about for the SME instrument phase 2, about 500,000 euros were obtained compared to the total absorption of almost 300 million. And this is very small. And also, if you're looking, more than 50% of the funds were absorbed by Spain. And that makes sense because they have the most of the projects that were submitted, and it's obvious that they will have the most funds that are absorbed. Another thing that makes access to Horizon 2020 very hard, from our opinion, is that it's very expensive. It's not expensive to access the funds, but in order to increase your chances of winning those funds from about 5% to about 30%, you need to work with consultants. And it will cost you from about 7,000 to 15,000 euros just to make the application and submit it, and then it will cost you an additional from 30,000 to 100,000 euros success fee. But of course, you need that you need to work with the consultant in order to attract those funds. So as a conclusion from my part, if you're a company, you need to look at not just one financing option, but look at several financing options. Because you need to look also on the positive sides and the advantages and disadvantages of each of financing options that you have, because in the end, everything costs you something. So that's it.
Michael, how old is your company?
Our company is from 2011, but we started activities in 2014.
So I guess that I'm just guessing here, that maybe the ease with which you got access to that loan from the bank was probably based on a proven sort of business model.
Yeah.
Because it sort of goes against one of the points of Aurélien, which I
Yeah,
guess
not as the point, yes. But for us, it was very different because we
Right.
proved that we were growing in a steady pace.
Okay. Well, listen, I propose to move on with this first round and turn next to Sergio to
Sergio.
also Sergio to give us your perspective on the do's and don'ts, or what works, what doesn't work. So please.
Guys, I'm so happy that I'm here and that we participate in this discussion and that you're looking at the actual information that comes from the market, because I think sometimes that we are from different planets, and that there is the reality is seen from different lenses, because what we need is different depending on where we come from. And I'm gonna just give a few hints of how I'm looking at this thing. So for me, if I look at high growth and I look at high growth and innovation, I think, okay, this sounds a little bit like the unicorns. Okay, so I'm looking at capital formation for unicorns. Who is financing that, and where the money is going, and how is it evolving? And I see that 40% of the capital of the unicorns are in terms of financing of unicorns is done in the States. 40% is done in China. And out of the remaining 20%, it's about 6% in the UK, 6% in India, and 12% the rest of the world, which, by the way, includes Europe. Which means that we are doing a terribly poor job at accelerating technology-based innovation. Okay? The fact that we're doing such a poor job has to have some sort of explanation in the way that the business is structured, in the way this access to technology, to finance for technology innovation is available. Now, one step back to see, FinTech OS is a company that is 20 months old, so it's less than 2 years, that has raised capital in a number of ways that I'm gonna explain, and is probably one of the candidates to become a really high growth company that would be visible at international level. Yeah, so we have raised about 2 million euros in capital so far. We have signed. Okay, we are in the process of raising in the next months another about 8 million as investment. So this is possible. Okay, the first good news is that this is possible. Yeah? Second is, it is possible in complete oblivion of having anything to do with the public funds. Because public funds, if they are there, they would be too slow for this kind of speed. I can't have 4 consequent rounds of financing of this size in a private company where I'm supposed to fight in the market with American and Chinese companies and wait and apply for a large dossier that is to be checked by someone. It doesn't work like that. So we start, pre-seed. You go pre-seed with 200K, which is angel investment. Okay, this is the easiest money to get, because you get at the idea phase. You know that there will be a market there, and you accelerate. Second, funny enough, banks have adapted. So banks are able to do that. And there is a sort of guarantee issued by the government that allows you, with a minimum cash deposit, to get the 200,000 and use it while you're completely unbankable as a company. Yeah? So because we don't make a profit, we don't have a track record of years and so on. So it kind of works. 200 plus 200. Then, again, and it's very interesting, there are instruments there, but they have just been created. So EIF has financed 4 funds in Romania, 4 funds for Romania, which is pretty amazing. Yeah? You have 2 venture capital funds, you have 2 growth funds. Each of them have the possibility to invest 2-3 million at the top for each company. So we got investment from one of these funds up to the level of 2 million. But this is pretty much everything that we can get from the region. In order to get to the next level, we have to go towards the bigger markets of the European Union. And everybody says at this stage that we will be getting, so we're getting Series A out of Europe, but everybody says that if we are doing well enough, we will not be able to raise Series B in Europe, because there are not large enough funds, there is not enough capital formation at that level. Okay? So this is a race, and this is a race where financing, having financing available in a non-bureaucratic way that is fast enough and is driven by people's ability to identify high growth and to take venture capital bets on the possibility of a particular business to become large enough and give that business the possibility to spend possibly 50 times more on investment in development than they would be able to invest if they were just using own funds in a traditional way. This is the kind of approach that, frankly, is sort of very difficult to match with the current funds allocation out of the public system. Now, that being said, what should the public system do? And I'm sorry if I dare to say things that I'm really not good at. But I think, there are certain things here that where you have to look at where are the blank spots on the map. Where are the gaps in capital financing? And the gaps in capital financing for high growth is everywhere where the growth is actually higher than what the banks can finance. Okay? So, and this is a very interesting area, because if you proceed with some sort of bureaucratic process where I apply something, I make an application, I get a dossier, and I get my money 1 year from now, this doesn't work. I mean, it's not accelerating enough the company to really make sense. This is for very stable companies that can wait 1 year for a new project. Okay? So it's good for jobs formation, but it is not good for growing competitiveness at international level. So this is separate. But what has happened actually is the fact that by providing the funds to accelerate private investment, you look at these VC funds, they're private managed. There is private money in there, but 70% of the money is still public, is still EIF, yeah? Or EBRD in different companies, or IFC, or, And so this is actually allowing the capital to accelerate faster, okay? What else? What is another source of capital that is needed for these funds to be created? Private pensions, okay? Facilitate formation of private pensions, because they would be private money that would be invested again as an accelerator in this kind of funds. And once you have created that kind of environment, you look where are the gaps. Venture capital typically invests only in technology-based companies, and technology-based companies would have 300, 500% per year growth in order to be eligible for that. Okay? Growth funds, private equity type of funds, would invest in companies that are profitable, and would invest in companies that are profitable and creating a growth of maybe 30%, maybe 50% per year. Okay? Venture capital would invest in companies that are making a huge loss at a, let's say, 5 to 10 times annual revenue valuation. Private equity would invest in profitable companies at, let's say, 5 to 10 times profit valuation, EBITDA valuation. There is a big gap there in between the two. And nowadays, you can achieve high growth in industries that have nothing to do with technology. Look at biofood. Look at pets. Look at local products that are natural. Look at wellness. Look at, there are a number of industries that are high growth as much as technology, because they represent trends in how the consumer works and how our mentality has evolved. So are we in a position to create a separate class of assets that would provide better valuation than the traditional growth capital to this category of high growth? Now, this is possibly some area where somebody that has an overview can play a role. Yeah? But even if that doesn't work, and let's assume for a moment that it doesn't work, we are back to having as many funds as possible that are privately managed, where they rely upon co-investment between private and public, and where this can be triggered by non-administrative business decisions of investment in high growth. And if we have that, I think we are safe.
Thank you very much, Sergio. I mean, I think what you said is very rich, and I only probably retained a fraction of what you've said, but I think it certainly sounds very, very, very pertinent. But I was just thinking as you spoke that I guess that there may be sectoral differences between, for example, the sector that you feed into, it's this regulated utilities, and you were saying that the venture capitalists were saying to you that you weren't actually bidding for enough money to make it of interest to them. Whereas I think maybe you're aiming at a different sort of sectoral dynamic where...
Our sector is also, you know, we are fintech. Now fintech is typically a player in a regulated, is a non-regulated player in a regulated industry. Because we are supposed to work in a space that is filled in by banks, and banks are anything but not regulated, especially in the European Union. So banking sector is heavily regulated, but you already have, and this is actually the first year when you have a number of unicorns, of European unicorns in the financial sector. Look at N26 in Germany, look at Revolut in the UK, and they are Monzo in the UK as well, and they are all expanding in the US now. You know, so this is how the environment looks like. Last year, Romania saw the first Romanian origin unicorn, having expanded to a level where now its current valuation is more than 3 times the valuation of the largest bank in Romania. But of course, by then, they are American companies. Yeah? Because this is where the capital formation is, so there is no other way to do it unless you cross the ocean, you re-register in the US, and you start doing it like that. Yeah? Now, is there a way where the European regulator can change that in a way that it makes it attractive to keep, okay, let's say N26. N26 is a German digital bank that has the status of unicorn, has reached that level. Will N26 remain in Germany? Because the next UiPath originating from Romania will definitely not stay in Romania.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of hooks for people to jump in and have a discussion on this, but let's continue with the initial the round of statements. I was going to turn to Luigi next, Luigi, to get your perspective from the I guess the business angel perspective, and maybe any thoughts that you might have on what you see to be the need for new approaches. I mean, we've seen a number of deficiencies and been identified in what's on offer, but Luigi, can I ask you to give us your perspective?
Well, thank you, and thanks for the invitation. Well, there are so many topics now on the table where I don't know where to start, but if I start from the last one about how to keep the unicorns in Europe, I think it is a problem of market fragmentation that starts, I think, from the very beginning of the journey of a startup and goes, you know, all along the way. With Business Angels Europe, one of the main policy topic we are addressing is how to create a single market for European startups and scale-ups. If we are not able to do that, we will always see our unicorns or potential unicorns move to larger and more homogeneous market for the simple reason that these are companies, and companies have to grow, have to make profit, and they have to go where, you know, there is a better opportunity for them. And this is normally not inside Europe. So I think that you know, we have this this type of problem, and this has to be, you know, this has to be done with first of all with 2 competing let's say regulations which cannot find a point of common understanding. One is the fiscal regulations, which are national and therefore create the fragmentation of the market. And on the opposite side, you have the competition policy, which is instead doing or trying to do exactly the opposite and saying that any SME in Europe should be free to compete wherever it likes in Europe, which is of course not true. Because if with my own company, I have already 4 offices in different countries, and in every country I have to create a new company, and I have to hire people with new legislations, and I have to comply with new standards and with new laws. And you know, when you have this kind of fragmentation, imagine you have to scale up a company into 28 countries, what do? Of course you go to the US. If you have a good product, you see that this is selling, or you go increasingly so to China and the rest. So I guess there is a problem with the agenda of one of our speakers. I don't know if you want to, that I stop and and I let you intervene, and then maybe I will come
Thank
back.
you very much, Luigi. Yes, indeed. I was remiss to forget that Rudy has a time constraint. So, Rudy, let's hear your thoughts on this issue before you.
Sorry, I apologize, but the program has changed. But first of all, I would say that I was quite positive about the two experiences, but because we always say high growth equals venture capital. Well, I give you one figure. If you look in the United Kingdom, which is the venture capital country by excellence in Europe, do you know how many of the high growth companies are financed through external equity? 4.8%. So the banks are still important, and I think it's a nice example that we should not forget the banks. I think this is one of the messages, the banks should be there. So therefore, in the region where you want to stimulate high growth, you need, as Aurélien said, all kinds of finances. You need business angels. I think Luigi is going to develop on business angels. You need banks, and I know it's not sexy, but from the public point of view, to develop loan guarantee schemes, I think it's something we really should do. You have a nice multiplier, a nice value for public money. So it's old-fashioned, but if you do it on a very nice way, I think we should do it. Then the equity gap. You spoke about the big problem of scale-up. Well, what we see, and again, this is a very frustrating figure, companies that do very well, like yours, they're moving, they're growing. At a certain moment, they are no longer looking for 1 million or 2 million, they're looking for 10, 15, 25 million. Skype was looking for 120 million. At that moment, as the average fund in Europe is 65 million, you don't find it. And what since with the University of Ghent, we made a study, which is very interesting, which shows that the money does not go where the company is, but the company go where the money is. And so we see that, for instance, for the companies that are very good in Europe, so the best companies, 45% of them scaled up mainly in the United States. And that's, of course, a major loss. So for me, first measures, let's look at the loan guarantee schemes. It's very important. Secondly, we've done a lot, and I think the report of GHR showed that a lot have been done for startups and that there the gap is narrowing. But now we really should focus on the scale up, on companies looking for 15 to 25 million. That's really where the market gap is for the future. And thirdly, I think we should not forget that perhaps you are not very representative in the sense that most of the young entrepreneurs, they still want to own their company. And it's very hard to say, I want to become a minority in my own company. And therefore, we have a solution. The solution is called mezzanine. And mezzanine is so developed, quasi-equity as you called it. Mezzanine is so developed in the United States, and we hardly have mezzanine. So I would say that every region that wants high-growth companies, they should develop mezzanine. And I think with the public funds as well, we should say, let's do something, because the advantage of mezzanine is you don't dilute, the owner remains the owner. But from the views of the bank, it's like equity. So the bank is going to give more debts. So I would say, let's focus on loan guarantee schemes, let's focus on the scale-up gap, and let's do something about mezzanine. If we could already do the three things, I think we could have partially an answer to what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you for that menu of potential points of focus. That's very helpful. I'm going to turn now to Andrea to give us unless Luigi, you want to yes. So Andrea, if you could give us the perspective from the EIB, and maybe your thoughts on the potential for more leverage of public money, or how to better share the risk in financing young innovative enterprises, or other general thoughts, please.
It's quite difficult to speak now, also because a number of interesting things has been said. And in the last 2 days, I prepared a lot of possible arguments that are not useful, given what has been said. But just to start, the EIB is let's say a quasi-public, because it's not. I'm not a civil servant. I discovered I'm an employee of an agency of Europe, but not a civil servant. Apart from that, the EIB is is lending money to in sector in which there are perceived market failures, and what we've been talking are market failures actually, where there are not enough money with respect to the social nice outcome. On what has been said, I'm totally in agreement on the fact that if we are looking at innovation capabilities or being at the frontier, there's a nice GRC database on the top 2,500 spenders in R&D, in which obviously you see US and Eurozone, Europe going a bit down, and China and South Korea gaining tremendous market share, tremendous share as a number of presence in that field. The nice things that we discovered last year looking at this Excel sheet is that US has this property, even though the number of firms there are pretty much the same, they changed a lot. There's a tremendous mobility there, and you find an incredible high number of new firms that are the new leaders in terms of new technologies and all this stuff that in Europe are not there, simply because it's difficult to see them growing in this way. And probably the biggest market failure is money for scaling up dramatically in that way.
Right.
So, having said that, what the EIB is doing is lending, pure lending through intermediaries, so giving guarantee and plafond to banks in order to provide money for SMEs, and that is needed for sure, because we know that at the start firms needs money from a bank, can need money from a bank, or apart from a seed and other things like that. We are providing a lot of different way. There is a nice work from the Vienna initiative that is a sort of forum in which there are the EIB, the EBRD, and also private banks that is devoted to financial stability at the start, but then at financial needs for East Europe and Southeast Europe too, obviously. And in there is a clear pointing out to the fact that venture capital and giving money, investing in venture capital funds and private equity funds, and also providing directly venture debt, as we started to do some years ago. It's valuable on two grounds. The first is what has been said, that here you can find a clear market gap. And the second is a clear and explicit tentative of involving the local savers, so providing space and opportunities for pension funds and other institutional savers to provide money through these channels. So I think that awareness of these needs is growing. Then for sure, I know that even with the premises I did, EIB is a sort of public agency, and that, I mean, is not probably the faster thing in the world, but we are moving and gaining awareness of the needs is for sure important.
Okay, thank you very much. The clock continues to tick away, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So before further engaging the panelists, I want to turn to see if anybody wishes to come in from the audience here with any comments or questions. So please has anybody got any particular questions or comments that they want to make on this? Yes?
Thank you very much for those very interesting views. I come from the EBRD, but one of the bits that I'm really interested in is this discussion about mezzanine. And conventionally, mezzanine has been really sort of applied on an equity basis from that sort of angle perspective. Very recently, I think in the UK in the last 10 years, in France also growing, the notion of private debt funds has started to rise. And just to give you a sense of the scale, I think in the UK up to last year, they'd raised £5 trillion for that purpose, to invest in SMEs actually predominantly. What's the view of the panel about this opportunity? Because this is where you can get scale. This is where you can start to talk to local financial institutions and raise money that way. Is there a view from the panel on this area?
Does anybody want to comment on that? Luigi? Well, while you're thinking, we take another question from the person at the back.
Hello. I would like to ask you about the destructive effect of the public money versus private money. It means that, as of my experience and my observation, public money don't all the time follow the best efficacy of the investment on the invention or transfer of technology. Instead, in rare case, private money mistakes. And I think that this is due to the public money is a public money, not of the people that distribute them. For that reason, I would like to ask you some measures, some filters in order more efficacy or more controlling or more of the investment of public money in the growing up of grants. I especially talk about the grants. It means that non-refundable money.
Does anybody want to have a go at either of those questions?
I'll try my chance on the first one. Yeah, I believe in mezzanine. I believe in mezzanine, and I believe generally in high interest debt, because that is the only debt that you can access when you're high growth and you do not have the guarantees. Because that would be any kind of debt that doesn't come with a guarantee. So the only guarantee that you have is the pledge on equity with a mezzanine. And this is very interesting form, because if you know that you're going to grow well enough that you can pay a 10% interest rate, then probably that's the only, and you would go above the exposure of, I don't know, how many times EBITDA or how many times turnover that the banks will give you, then that's the way to go. There is an alternative way to go, which is very interesting, and is also available in Romania, and I've used it in one of my investments. And this is bonds issued on the stock exchange. Each of the stock exchanges, including the one in Romania and in the UK, there is AIM there, would have a section for SMEs. And this section for the SMEs allows if a company that is, if it's solid enough and if it's, let's say, visible enough to get enough traction by issuing bonds on the local market such that you can get financing that doesn't have the securities that the banks would require, doesn't have the securities that mezzanine would require, and at the same time would be pretty high interest, not as high as mezzanine, but would give you the financing without any other headache, except for the regulatory headaches of being listed. Or not necessarily being listed, but listing the financial instrument on the stock market. So I think this is actually an alternative way, high interest loan, either as bonds or as mezzanine. This is a very interesting way that, again, if we think of it and if we think that this is something that works and we can accelerate it, it's just about, you know, in the public sector, just looking at how to facilitate the capital formation in that class, in that asset class, in order for it to be further distributed into the economy.
Luigi.
Yeah, I think on the second question about public funding and how to improve public-private funding collaboration, I believe this is one of the key areas in which angel investors become a relevant player in the chain of financing high growth companies, in the sense that the best way, I believe, to ensure that public funding is spent in the right way is to engage private financing as early as possible alongside public funding. I don't think you can exclude public funding from the process of growing innovative companies. I think this is the same everywhere in the US, in Europe, and it's not true that there is no public funding even in a largely developed market like the US. But the best way of ensuring that the results of the public funding and the public financing works well is that there is some real private money alongside. And this is where normally angel investors play a strong role, because they're normally the very first ones putting private money into companies alongside the entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, Luigi. Listen, we're rapidly approaching 25 past, which is the cutoff for this session. So before just any concluding comments from me, I just want to look one last time at the panel to see if they have any particular sort of take-home message that they would like to shoot out to, say, the policy, basically to in relation to the real world at which you're operating, to let us know now. Otherwise, we'll just bring this session to a conclusion. I think Sergio
I'm sorry, I grabbed the microphone again, but I thought that my initial statements came a bit too harsh in saying that we're not doing enough, and indeed we're not doing enough, but at the same time we're doing tremendously better compared to what we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think that there are instruments and there is awareness, and governments are playing a role, and European institutions are playing a role in capital formation, allowing even Romanian SMEs in a possibly least developed market, but providing us the availability of privately managed funds that can help us scale. And this is amazing. And I'm talking about myself in that particular segment. But there is also the general availability of grants at the very, very early pre-seed level that allow a large number of companies to be created, and a large number of potential entrepreneurs to really bite the bullet and start doing something that is or can become a potential source of value creation. And this is very valid for us that, again, coming from the poorer member states, the fact that we can turn the economy around and start to create wealth at a broader level, and this can almost never be done just with good ideas. You need lots of money, and money generally is less available in this part of the world. And if we create the environment where money is available, you would be amazed at how much the creativity and the innovation that lies within normal people in normal places can deliver. So thank you for having the initiative to have this conference here, and perhaps we will see more of this.
Any last words from you, Mihai? Are you done?
Yeah, I agree with Sergio. One last remark is the fact, from my standpoint, access to finance is much easier than a few years ago. For example, when we started the company, we couldn't even imagine how easy it would be to obtain finance for our company. But things are looking up right now. I think we're moving in the right direction. Of course, it could be better.
Yes.
And of course, we all expect it to be better. And we're always working towards a better functioning of things.
Andrea, any last remark?
No, only that it's true that occasions like these are very useful to create that awareness that we're talking about. Again, is not an advertisement. We enlarged quite strongly the palette of products that the EIB is trying to devote to start up and scale up and quasi-equity and venture debt and things like that. I agree that a huge, strong collaboration with the private sector is also as a provider of finance, not only as the end point, as a borrower, is needed, is obviously needed, because that would be fruitful. That's all.
Luigi?
Well, I think on the positive side, I would concur in saying that what has happened in the last 20 or 30 years in terms of innovation, entrepreneurship, access to finance, it's unthinkable. I mean, when I started our angel group, it was 2007, and we were 9 people, and angel investing was almost non-existent in Italy. And 12 years later, our group is formed by 200 angels. We are one of the largest early stage investors in the country. There are new clubs. This is growing, and people are believing that this is possible. So there is a very good, let's say, momentum. At the same time, I would say, especially as you say, as a policy message and for the institution, I mean, we need really to overcome this fragmentation problem. I mean, until we will have funds that have 500 million, 1 billion under management, we will never have the possibility of investing 25 million per company. And it's been, I think it's, of course, people are saying we're going to do this, let's talk about scale up, but the speed at what this is at which this is happening is far too slow. I mean, we lost the IT battle, we have lost the biotech battle, we are now losing the artificial intelligence battles. How many of these new trends and new technology battles we want to lose?
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I mean, my sort of summary of this and the take-home messages is, okay, we're doing well. We could do a lot better. It's like the typical school report feedback. But it's not just doing better, but also doing faster. And that looming very large in the backdrop to everything is the fragmentation of the single market. And then we had a number of particular emphases placed on loan guarantees, the scale-up financing gap, and the potential for medicine. So that's my conclusion. There's the points that I draw and maybe take home with me. Maybe others will have other take-home messages. But in conclusion, I just want to thank my colleague Aurélien for organizing this session. He did all of the hard work in bringing together this panel. And of course, thank you finally once again to all of the panelists for making available yourselves, your time, and sharing your thoughts, experience, and ideas for how we go ahead with this. And we certainly will integrate the essence of what we've heard here today in our own work in the JRC, which hopefully will have some relevance in the EU policy-making circuit and policy-making at national member state level as well. Thank you for your participation and attendance, and I close the session now. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I propose we start this session. I was told to start it at 5 p.m. and I think we're on 5. So this session, to which I welcome you, is on the topic of assessing the regional innovation impact of universities. My name is James Gavigan. I work in the unit Knowledge for Finance, Innovation and Growth of the European Commission's Joint Research Centre. And this is the second of 2 sessions in the analytical studies stream at this conference. So the aim of this session is to discuss ways, means and concrete examples of efforts whereby universities in Europe should realize their potential contribution to their respective innovation ecosystems. And indeed, as pointed out in the 2017 Lamy report, universities in Europe on the whole are far from realizing this potential. But innovative universities around Europe are indeed trying and succeeding to make progress on this, including also enhancing their regional innovation impact. And innovation performance-based funding can incentivize and support universities in their efforts to enhance their impact. This is, I guess, a thesis, a point for discussion. And in this regard, in 2018, so last year, the JRC published a framework for assessing the impact of universities on the regional innovation ecosystems, the so-called RIA framework. That stands for Regional Innovation Impact Assessment, correct? So the objectives then of this assessment framework is to provide a framework, a workable basis on which one could build an additional institutional funding stream for universities based on the contribution that they have to their regional innovation systems. So in this session, we're going to hear a number of presentations and an opening statement by one of the panelists, and this will be followed by panel discussion and then some concluding remarks. The first presentation by Koen Jonkers will give an overview of this regional innovation impact assessment framework and the results of some comparative case study analysis. And this will be followed by 2 case study presentations, one by Svilen Kunev on the case of the Angel Kanchev Rus University in the city of Rus in the northern central region of Bulgaria, and the second case study by Francesc Xavier Grau Vidal on the case of Rovira i Virgili University in the cities of Tarragona and Reus in the region of Catalonia in Spain. And the speakers then will be joined in the panel by Kirill Geratliev, who's here with us, and possibly by the vice rector of the university campus in which we're based, Tudor Prisigaru, but we're not sure if he's actually going to join us. We haven't seen him. But before proceeding with these presentations, I do want to introduce the speakers in a little bit more detail. So Koen Jonkers is deputy head of the Knowledge for Finance, Innovation and Growth unit at the JRC. Koen has a PhD from the University Institute, the European University Institute in Florence, and master's degrees in engineering and the social sciences. And he has over 40 publications on research and innovation and on highly skilled migration-related policy issues. And presently, he is working on the analysis of European universities, and he is also involved in projects analyzing the Chinese research and innovation system, the impact of technological change on the future of work and education. Svilen Kunev is a member of the Department of Management and Business Development at the University of Rus in Bulgaria, and he has experience as coordinators of activities within the Center for Entrepreneurship in the Faculty of Business and Management, and in the Center for Technology Transfer of the university. And his field of research cover production management, engineering, entrepreneurship, and various other issues. And he has experience in several EU-funded programs as manager coordinator. And his focus is on regional and business development, localization issues, innovation activity of SMEs, and so on. And Francesc Xavier Grau Vidal He is currently the Secretary for Universities and Research of the Government of Catalonia, but he is also Professor of Fluid Mechanics at the University of Rovira i Virgili, and he has a PhD in Industrial Chemistry from the University of Barcelona. But he's also been researcher at the Institute of Fluid Mechanics in Toulouse, as well as in the NASA Ames and Stanford University Center for Turbulence Research in the United States. And he has more than 100 papers and has supervised 12 PhD theses. And he has had various functions such as director of the Department of Mechanical Engineering. He's been vice rector and rector of his university. And he's also been director of the Global University Network for Innovation and vice president of the Vives Network of Universities. And Kirill Geratliev is executive director of Bulgaria's Science and Education Executive Agency since November 2017. And he has experience in managing programs and projects, design, implementation, monitoring, and financial management and program and project closure, with experience in competitiveness, regional development, cross-border cooperation, as well as setting up management and control systems in public and private sectors. And he has a BSc in Management and Administration from the University of Economy in Sofia and an MSc from Varna Free University. So I think without further ado, we'll get started with the presentations. And Koen, you can kick us off with the overview of the RIIA framework.
Thank you very much. I suppose this microphone works like this, so I'll use that. I have a presentation which is online. So I'll briefly introduce this framework for you and provide first also some background into its development of why we have developed this. Work on university started a couple of years ago in our unit, and we first did a comparative analysis of research performance-based funding systems in Europe, and there we also started thinking about innovation performance-based funding. We then did a couple of case studies, including one on Aalto University and the way it was embedded in the ESPO innovation ecosystem. Until 2 years ago, when Pascal Lamy and colleagues wrote their high-level expert report, the LabFab report, in which they made the assessment that universities in Europe at present do not yet reach their full contribution in contributing to their innovation ecosystems. And one of the potential ways they suggested that could be supported or incentivized was to provide a kind of top-up funding, either at the European or the national or the regional level, to universities to engage more in this third mission and also be supported in doing so. Now, we were asked to start thinking about what such a system could look like, and we thought, well, that would need to be underpinned by a kind of assessment system. And thinking about research performance-based funding, we thought, well, we could have a kind of innovation performance-based funding where the allocation of institutional research funding could be based on the ex-post assessment of innovation impact. Now, that's easily said, but assessing the impact, the innovation impact of a university ex post is actually a fairly hard thing to do, and that's true for various reasons. One of them is that impacts often take a very long time to develop and to materialize, and for that reason, many analysts and government evaluators tend to focus on output and results, which can potentially lead to impacts in the future. Another reason why it is very difficult is that a university is a very complex organization, operating in a complex system, and it can have very many different types of impacts on these systems. Now, building on this assessment, we grouped the types of impacts that we thought the university potentially had on its regional innovation ecosystem into 5 categories. One has to deal with regional leadership, and this ties very much into the theme of this conference today, dealing with how universities can contribute, for example, to smart specialization. The second has to do, and the central mission of university, the generation of knowledge and the transfer of knowledge. Entrepreneurship and support to enterprise development may also be a way that the university can contribute to its regional system. And lastly, and very importantly as well, for most universities, is the way that they contribute to human capital development through teaching and to supplying or training their students, many of whom may take an active role in their regional innovation ecosystem thereafter. Here we focus, for example, also on entrepreneurship skills. That being said, it is the extent to which a university can impact on its regional system is heavily dependent also on the absorptive capacity of the regional system itself. It is different for a university in a high-tech system, a high-tech region, to contribute to its system than a university in a lagging region where there may not be the same level of companies available to make use of the knowledge that it generates. And therefore we thought it's also quite important to take into account this regional development level. Now on each of these categories we compiled a number of indicators, but we think just mechanically assessing indicators, ranking universities in itself is not enough to understand how the university impacts on its regional system. And therefore we propose in this framework that these universities build university case studies supported by indicators in which they explain how they affect their regional innovation ecosystem and contextualize this impact. Now I give some examples of the indicators we had in mind. Profiling, for example, R&D related income from private sectors, student startups and spin-offs, a number of students enrolled in entrepreneurship courses, but these are just examples of the 20-30 indicators we put together for each of these categories. Indicators which tend to be available or depending on the university and the system, but many of these indicators can indeed be collected either centrally or by the university themselves. Then on the regional development level, we could, for example, look at the regional innovation scoreboard to get a measure of the level of development of the innovation ecosystem in which the university operates. Now these indicators, as well as qualitative pieces of evidence, would feed into case studies in which, and you don't have to read all this, but in which evidence for each of these different categories would be fit together in a narrative, together with qualitative pieces of evidence of innovation impact, would feed into a narrative in which the university explains how it impacts on its regional innovation ecosystem. And these case studies would then be assessed by panels of independent experts, innovation experts, who make an assessment of the way that the university performs. What we do as a follow-up is we are testing how this works with 20 universities throughout Europe. These are different types of universities, technical universities, comprehensive universities, regional universities, and leading research universities, because all of these different types of bodies will have a different way of telling their story, and they have different types of impacts as well. Some examples that come out of here is, for example, there's a number of universities, an increasing number of universities, which take performance-based or project-based learning approach, problem-based or project-based learning approaches, in which they integrate real-life examples, let students work on real-life examples, and in this way integrate entrepreneurship skills, entrepreneurship competences throughout the curriculum. Many universities, in fact all the universities we studied, involve companies in their curriculum design and interact with companies on how they do this. This one will be explained. Universities play a role in regional development strategies, for example in smart specialization. And then universities also play an important role of course, in knowledge generation and in knowledge transfer. Now this is not only true for technical universities, but also for comprehensive universities, which also have made a big effort in seeing how they can transfer the knowledge they generate, either in technical fields or in the social science and humanities, to their broader ecosystem. Now, some universities argued you should not measure us as a university in isolation, because if we get key performance indicators, for example, of knowledge transfer, you miss something important. It is more important to see how we co-evolve with our innovation ecosystem, because only in doing so will you incentivize the right type of behavior. Now, this is a very brief introduction. I will show you very quickly the lists of indicators, but I'm not going to discuss that. But this is something that I can share either through the report or afterwards. But rather than going through this in depth, I think I'll pass back the microphone to James. And thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you, Koen. That's given you, if you like, a quick view of the overall framework, and I think there's no better way than to bring that to life than by actually showing some case studies that are the next two presentations. So could I turn immediately then to the first case study, which will be by who was first on the list? It was, yes, Roos University. So, Svilin, can you, first of all, give us your presentation and tell us how this played itself out in the case of Roos University? Whichever one, anyone. I think they all work.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation, and for me and for our university, it's a pleasure and honor to be here with you to discuss some of our activities. I would like to thank to Cohen also for the invitation and for suggesting our input, like examples. My presentation, I'll try to keep it short and is more or less evidence-based. I'll just put some examples of activities that we already have done and have been doing in our university on those four major directions of the topic for the regional assessment of the universities. So this is my idea, to show brief some examples and then to unlock later on if you have any questions to discuss. About our case, the University of Ruse, it's located on the, just to see, on the cross-border region with Romania. It's on the northern part of Bulgaria, just on the Danube River, and we have a common border with Romania. That's why we have the region in Bulgaria, but we also have the cross-border impact with our Romanian partners. What is more specific or more interesting about this higher educational institution? It's a state-owned public institution and has regional impact on the northern part of the country, because we have outside our major campus in Ruse, we have 3 more locations in the northern part of country, also on the Danube River, here on this part of the country. And about the first direction, the education and human capital development, what are our examples? First, the number of students. We are among the, let's say, the medium-sized universities in the country with around 8,000 students, with a lot of incentives to cooperate with local and regional business. If we talk about innovations or sustainable development or also smart specialization, another interesting example here is the Master Degree of Entrepreneurship Innovation, which was designed in 2009, and since then it's going constantly, together with some colleagues and some support from the one university from Netherlands, the Delft University then. Different types of activities we perform with students and with young people that we have in the university. fostering the entrepreneurial thinking or creating of new startup ideas. Not also from the students from the business courses, business course degrees, but also from students from the technical faculties. By the way, we have the 8 faculties. 4 of them are engineering faculties with different directions, and 4 humanitarian faculties with also different specializations. For the second general direction, the research and technological development, what kind of examples we can offer here from our activities. First, we have the so-called University Research Complex. UNICOMP is its abbreviation, and it combines different units inside. It represents the research infrastructure inside the university, with different centers and different laboratories that we have located around in all the faculties in the university. Another fact in that direction is the Technology Transfer Center, which was created 11 years ago, and already has some results for patents and innovational products. A lot of efforts we put on attracting financial resources for continuing the research and development activities from different types of programs. Also from the national programs, national funds, but also from European and international sources. This is the point to say here that we receive a lot of support from the national institutions, the ministry and the agencies in Bulgaria, and their programs that we apply each year, and if we suggest interesting or efficient ideas, they support us. Another event or example here is the Hey Innovate initiative that we have from the European Commission also. And our first survey was done in 2014, and since then we have passed through additional, let's say, surveys to evaluate the type of entrepreneurship spirit that we have in the university. And also some other examples, I'm not going to go into details, about different participations in innovational events. The third direction, the entrepreneurship support and support to enterprise development, there are several examples that could be very interesting, and we are constantly developing them. The business plan competition that we have among all students in the university, it's a traditional event that we organize since 2001, and it also is organized with students from all the faculties in the university. We do not focus only on the business faculty because maybe the most interesting advantage of such a higher education institution like ours is that we can have some hybrid knowledge. We have engineering and business and management topics. The international contacts of the university are supported by several academic networks that we already take part in. Like example is one which is focused on the Southeast European universities that teach or do research in the field of entrepreneurship and innovation. The network Rešica, it's called after a Romanian city because the first meeting and starting was there. The Technology Transfer Office I also mentioned. The Center for Entrepreneurship Promotion or Support is one of my favorite, let's say, inside units because here we support our students, not only those that are currently studying in the university, but also our alumni or those that already graduated, but also need some advice or support how to develop their business ideas or where they could find sources for starting capitals or starting activities of their companies. And another interesting idea here is how to prolong and to develop their family businesses. We have a lot of examples of students that they are the second or third generation of family business, and their main goal is to succeed and to enlarge the family business. Some incubating facilities we also have in the university. It's a startup factory, this is the name, also connected with starting companies with students. A lot of events that are connected with promotions of entrepreneurship, also national or international ones, with very interactive sessions. We do a lot of things also with students from the university, but with younger students from the high schools or secondary schools in the region, in also to combine and to make different teams. A lot of, let's say, other international companies like the regional representatives of Google, they made some events with us with the main idea to suggest instruments for support of the entrepreneurship development. And the fourth direction, the regional orientation and the strategical development, what we can offer and suggest for our region. Different types of collaborations with the local stakeholders, not only the business organizations, but also with other NGOs or local official authorities. With not only events, but different activities that we do. For example, the regional strategies for development of the Rusa region was created by a joint team with our university and specialists and experts from the regional administration offices. We also have very good examples and experience with interim evaluations of regional development strategies of different other regions outside RUSE. We try to collaborate with the regional authorities, not only in our region, but in different other regions in the country. One example is the creation of a Forum for Regional Development for cooperation in the north-central region of Bulgaria. All those activities are focused on fostering and trying to improve the regional environment in our north-central region. In conclusion, in order not to be so in so details, what our vision could be for the next years. First, to continue to use the most interesting or most important advantage of our university is his polyfunctionality and different types of teaching, learning, and doing scientific research. To be more orientated to applied research and to try to develop the research infrastructure in the region. One example for that, again, with the support from the state, from the government of Bulgaria, is the starting of our university science park. It is an example of knowledge infrastructure which started this year and is scheduled to be ready next year, where it's a site, a location where we will have combined all the laboratories of different faculties in the university and also some research infrastructure for doing co-innovational activities with business or external stakeholders that could come to university and jointly together to develop new ideas. So this is the major step in the next 3 to 5 years. I would like to thank you very much for the option and for the honor to present those activities, and hopefully we can discuss them later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Willem. Just before we move to the next case study, just a question for clarification. Is this one of the universities that was chosen amongst the 20, was it you said, Koen, to focus on for the application of the regional innovation impact assessment framework? Or
Yes, indeed. In the 20 universities, we try to have a variety of different types of universities in different parts of Europe and of different nature. So research universities, technical universities, more applied universities, regional universities. And I think the University of Russe is a good example of a university in the Balkan region, which plays an active role in its regional system. So that was the reason that.
So it is one of the examples.
It is one of the cases.
So maybe keep for the discussion. I'm just curious to know, how you see the framework, because you didn't mention it explicitly in your presentation, but I guess it was implicit. But this was my thought listening to your presentation. Okay, thanks. We'll come back maybe to that in the discussion.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, I think we move directly to the second case study, which is the University Rovira i Virgili in Catalonia. And Francesc, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to share the experience of my university during the last, in fact, I will talk about the experience of the last 15 years. And there is 5 years that I'm no more the rector of the universities. And now, right now I'm Secretary for University and Research in the Catalan government. But I will not speak on that capacity. I will speak as the former rector of my university. It's amazing how we can reflect the case of Rus University. I've been myself, I feel reflected on what I saw. So probably more, there are things that can be repeated and the schemes that can be repeated from university to university. First, I would like to introduce a little bit the region of Tarragona. Tarragona is southern Catalonia. You can see here Spain, Catalonia northeast, and Tarragona is south of Catalonia. It represents roughly 10% of Catalonia in population and GDP. But it has some specificities, let's say. It concentrates cultural heritage. Tarraco is, for instance, the ancient Roman capital of Spain, of Hispania, was there. It concentrates chemical industry, 50% of the chemical industry of Catalonia, which is 50% of that of Spain. So 25% of Spain is there in Tarragona. It concentrates energy production. There are 3 nuclear plants among the 8 nuclear plants that are in Spain. So it's a huge concentration of energy production. It concentrates tourist activity. It can seem a paradox, but it's an interesting equilibrium. And it concentrates the production of wine in Catalonia with most of the wine DOs that we have, with other things. So this is a profile of the region that here you can see in images. The same thing, if you know the region if you have been there, you can recognize some of the pictures here. So it's an interesting equilibrium between natural resource, touristic resource, and industrial resource. And I moved to my university. It's a very young university. It belongs to the last wave of creation of universities in Spain at the beginning of the 90s, as many parts in Europe. And it's a medium-sized university too. Here we see about 14,000 students. I must say here at this point, more than 80% of the bachelor students are from the region, but 32% of doctoral students come from abroad. So it has a dual profile, would be a regional university at bachelor level, but international university at postgraduate level. You can see this also on the scientific production. 42% is done in international collaboration. I will emphasize here these dual characteristics of the university. How has been the history of that? We were created 24 years ago. I've been in the direction of the university for half of this period. So I've been 6 years as a vice rector and 8 years as a rector, so I know part of this trip. So from practically zero scientific production to a relatively high number, how we moved from a set of colleges that were depending on University of Barcelona and Polytechnic University of Catalonia we moved into a comprehensive research university with local and global impact. Now, I will not spend much time here, but just to know that the rankings are putting people on comparison around the world. So our university, despite being young and despite being regional university, and despite coming from a set of colleges, right now is well ranked in several global rankings, and especially in national rankings, where systematically is among the best 10 universities in Spain. How has been this trip? So here I wanted to identify some milestones, some building blocks in this strategy. First, in 2001, there was probably the defining thing of the university, a strategic research plan from which we decided some priority areas, avant la lettre, let's say. Chemistry and chemical engineering, classical and prehistoric archaeology, enology, tourism, leisure, nutrition and health. You can see that those areas fit the economical and social singularities of our region. Then there were a strategic teaching plan, there were an alignment of teaching and research policies, a third mission and internationalization strategic plans, and then Spain made a call for international campuses of excellence, and we received the label in 2010 as an international excellence campus. Here, just one picture about the strategic plan for the third mission, just to say that in addition to the usual acts of knowledge and technology transfer, we introduced one act in cultural outreach, one in social impact, another one in internationalization of the region through the activity of the university, and one singular one is to promote, to participate in the governance of the region, in establishing the strategy of the region. So this is our vision of our role in our society with this strategic plan in the third mission. Of course, there is some follow-up, some measurement of the impact that we have on each of these fields. We were working also to build around the university, not within the university, but around the university, a network of research centers and technological centers on each of the fields of priority. So there is a research center on chemistry, a research center on archaeology, and so on, following the strategy. Those centers are government centers, are not belonging to the university, but are participated by the university and within the campus of the university. And all of this complex is what was recognized as a campus of scientific, international excellence by the Spanish call. Also, following that act that I mentioned, we are been working in building our region of knowledge, participating with social agents like chambers of commerce, unions, employers, associations. The Harbor of Tarragona, we create an association to define the strategy of the region. Or we distribute around the region some antennas of knowledge. Or with the provincial council, we create a Tarragona office for the knowledge region to facilitate companies to attract money from especially Europe. Those are examples of working around the university with the social agents. And some results of that. First, the evaluation of the economic impact of all of that. Here we receive a block grant of around 75 million, plus what we receive from contracts and projects, plus what students pay for a study in the university. This added up gives the results. First, the academic and scientific results. That's our mission, our first mission. It implies a total expense of 129 millions in that year. And this gives rise to a total economic impact evaluated through the activity of providers and so on in the region of about 600 million, which is 3% of the GDP of the province. In this process, we created some infrastructure. Those are specific centers, technology centers for the field of specialization of the university. There is a technological center for the wine industry, one for nutrition and health, another one for chemistry, another one for tourism, and there is a generic one for the remaining activity of all the university. All these infrastructures have been, for instance, financed through European funds and co-financed by the university. So the university is making the investment on that directions. And finally, that's what I prefer. On the last internal call made through the Research and Innovation Smart Specialization Strategy in Catalonia, there were some projects that are right now developing. Those projects came from around the region, but the more important thing to me is that they are not led by the university. They are led by local and regional, either councils or consortia, including companies, around the region. The university is participating, helping them, but is not leading. So those initiatives, in fact, are as a result of the policy of the university. And I think that's all. Thank you. And ready to
Thank you very much, Francis Xavier. I've got about a million questions I could ask, but before we come to the more discussion part of the session, I want to first of all give the floor to Kirill Geratliev as a panelist to share with us his remarks, reactions to what he's heard and to what he has maybe reflected on this topic more generally before we enter into the more interactive discussion. Kirill.
Thank you. Honestly, I'm impressed about the two case studies presented. Speaking about Russia, I'm familiar because I'm Bulgarian and I know the case very well. But your case is also very interesting. What is my impression? First, in Bulgaria, we are supporting university through dual support system. Maybe you know that from competitive side, we have complementing funding from Science Fund under the Ministry of Science. But under our operational program, we are funding several universities and institutes of Bulgarian Academy of Science. I see my presentation. I will use this presentation in order to show some examples. Can I have, yeah. Thank you. Is this one? Yeah. The other one, the opposite one. No? So through competitive funding, we are providing some support thanks to European funds. And later I will briefly explain my idea because RUSE is part of our Center of Excellence and Center of Competence projects. and also generator of one of the new schemes which we are preparing. Institutional funding is providing some block funding for salaries, for infrastructure and equipment, and this is very common for southeastern countries. The wrong button. Yeah. Few words about our operational program. As you can see, we have 4 priority axes. The first one, research and technological development, is funded by European Fund for Regional Development, and the remaining 3 axes are European Social Fund. So under the first priority axis, now we have 13 contracts which are under implementation, and 2 of them are under implementation with participation of the case study 1, University of Russia. Under priority axis 2 and 3, we are supporting schemes for school education, higher education, vocational education, and also active inclusion and socio-economic integration. As you can see, thanks to our history, for the moment, the big concentration of funds is in Sofia, which create a lot of political problems because, as you may know, a lot of funds from Priority Axis 1 were mainly programmed to be implemented at regional level. But what happened after the competitive call is the fact that main part of the allocation are in Sofia explicitly. We have some funds in Southeast region, in North Central region where Russia is located, and some funds are in South Central and Southeastern Europe. Having our 13 contracts under implementation, I must say that for the moment we have more than 30 universities involved in this partnerships, and 29 institutes under Bulgarian Academy of Science. And here I have just 3 slides specifically for the projects with Russia. And the first one is for Center of Excellence, led by Sofia University in Sofia, with participation of Russia and also other partners, Technical University in Sofia and University in Burgas, and also University in Shumen. As you can see, those contracts are under implementation since 2023. And the second project is Center of Competence, and here we have more regions involved from Varna, Russia, Gabrovo, Plovdiv, and again the lead partner is from Sofia region. I will speak a little bit about this important scheme now because in the beginning of the year, the rector of University of Russia came to our offices, to the minister and to our agency, and he proposed very interesting scheme. It was not mentioned by civilian, but I will explain that they are part of a network which is from China to Europe. You forgot this. And he presented the idea to us, and we were thinking maybe end of this year or early next one to propose a new scheme which will try to unify your report coin. You are part of this regional impact assessment report, which is very useful for us. And as a policy makers, we will use your indicators box in order to try to have 2 steps approach of application. But first, what we will use our rating system. It was not mentioned by me, but under Priority Access 1, we have a project, and we have Bulgarian rating systems. It's a small project, just 2 million leva, but we have a clear picture of all bachelor's, master's, and postdoctoral degree, which are now ongoing in Bulgaria. And through this rating system, we have very clear activities in each university presented there. The second topic which we would like to use is Age Innovate instrument. RUSE was the first, and several other universities are also using this self-assessment tool. And of course, I hope till, let's say, November, December, to finalize the whole concept. But the idea behind is to have some mix between the policy indicators box presented in your report, and the report is very, very good, I must say. And to try to start this scheme next year. So we will have a unique elements, not only related to management or organizational capacity of university, but also giving opportunity for establishment of digital transformation and innovative technology centers. And University of RUSE is having this since, I don't know, 11 years or something like that. Professor Smrikarov is the leader of this center. So I use just this presentation to say a few other things, and I will try to be short. So, JRC, thank you for this invitation, and thank you for your report. It was useful as a policymaker to use it. But thank you also for the support which we will receive as executive agency in the next months, because this is quite important, and the time is quite important. Our Center of Excellence, Center of Competence are just starting, and we know that the huge partnership between these contracts. We have some 17 partners projects. Can you imagine how difficult it is to take decision in some projects? It's very important this to be scrutinized, and the example with the report Reshaping of Functional Capacity of Sofia Tech Park is a good model for us. So we would like to see those Center of Excellence and Center of Competence derived from our side after your support in the right direction post-2021. We are just in a process of preparing our new priorities under our operational program, and I hope that through your support we will reach the right solutions for Bulgarian science education sector. I will mention one more report, because it was not in my presentation, but if you want to know more about the research and innovation capacity and observatory in our country, it's another example of JRC support to Bulgaria. It was published soon, prepared by Angelina Todorova and Maria Slavcheva. This is my intervention. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kiro. So I think we've heard in the presentations, some very positive cases of how universities embedded in regional contexts have actually been developing good practices for already over a decade or more. And we've also heard how the JRC's effort to come up with this regional innovation impact assessment framework has already been taken up already in one way by yourselves. And really just at the back of my mind, maybe just to kick off the discussion, and then we'll open the floor to everybody, is I'm just wondering, just to take it back up to a more general level, I mean, what do you think about this idea that maybe an indicators-based evaluation approach could be a means whereby part of the funding of the universities could be determined? you know, I mean, you talked about block grants. It appeared in some other slides as well. But this is, I think, a novel idea which has been, I think, put forward by the regional impact assessment framework and maybe and came from the original Lamy report. But what has that entered into your thinking at all? If so, what are your thoughts on it now, and how do you see maybe this assessment framework has been put forward, maybe playing a role in a customized way in that regard in your respective cases? Yes, Francis Xavier.
Yeah. Now I can speak from the other side.
The other side, yes, indeed.
You can imagine that I'm pro this approach, this narrative with numbers, these evidence-based policies. So, for sure, I think they are useful. The framework is useful. It makes you a way of standardizing some way of making comparisons of having those evidences. When you select a set of indicators, you are always oversimplifying. But it's worse not to select the indicators. So I think what we experienced at university, it was before having those kinds of policies in Europe. So they were made from the definition of their own university. But I recognize that it would have been very useful to have that framework at that time, because it will guide our activity, it will give you the way of comparing with others, and it will give you references to your goals. So now from the government, I think that we should emphasize this role of the universities, and we should recognize the impact that they have. And for sure, the allocation of resources is one powerful tool to do that.
I can speak just for operational programs, science and education for smart growth for the moment, because in the public funding from the state budget, there are changes which are coming, and I'm aware that very soon, maybe September, October, we will have some news there. But indicator boxes A, B, C, D are very well prepared by GRC, and the team prepared this report, and we would like to use this for selection of those universities which really have regional impact on innovation in the region. And RUSE is a very good example. I was several years ago in another ministry, and I remember RUSE as a head of cross-border cooperation department. They were quite active in Romania-Bulgaria program, and also Interreg B-Strand in the past. So they are keen to continue this, and the example of RUSE is clearly showing that such university should be supported through our funds to have innovation impacts on the ground. It is clearly that their example is a good one. Unfortunately, I don't know your case. I was really impressed what was presented from your side, but I cannot comment for the moment. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that there's clearly a positive sort of echo coming back from you on the relevance and utility of an indicator-based approach to evaluating the impact assessment of universities at regional level, and maybe even indeed determining or using that to determine some element of funding. It's a conceivable and possibly workable notion. I don't know if it's too early for you to comment on whether or not there are gaps in the framework as put forward by the JRC, or if you haven't yet examined it in that regard. But maybe broadening a little bit further the discussion. You know, I mean, okay, this is one particular tool, but are there other thoughts or considerations that you would like to share regarding other ways and means of incentivizing this regional innovative behavior of universities that have got this regional embeddedness and vocation? And then I'm going to turn to the audience to see if there's any comments or questions coming from that side. But maybe this slightly broader issue, I'm sort of casting the net a little bit wider than just the indicator-based approach per se, because you obviously have got a long experience in furthering such a mission for universities.
Thank you, because I think you're right. It's interesting to have this overall vision. What first I would like to say that the first responsibility of universities is being a university, and if it is a research university, the university has to have impact in the generation of knowledge and the transmission of knowledge first. But any university has a society to serve. In that sense, what I perceive is a need for some alignment of political measures at all levels. We have those big European programs, we have national programs, and we have even regional programs. We have to make an effort from the political side or from the political decisions to be sure that they align at the maximum. And if we can work on that sense, probably we can simplify things. For instance, that powerful tool that is the Research and Innovation Smart Specialization Strategy, that is conceived from the DG ratio, it has a powerful impact on scientific policies within the region. Why not to increase that alignment? Why not to relate that policy to imply more strongly the universities on the development of the strategies?
In your case, in the case of your university, was there any explicit attempt, say on the part of your university, to take into consideration the sectoral or other priorities that came out of the smart specialization strategy for Catalonia?
Yeah.
Or not?
Our strategy was developed before that, well before that.
Yes.
But when Catalonia was preparing the strategy at the level of Catalonia, we didn't have the opportunity to participate politically.
Okay.
And that's the point. As a university, it could be a requirement to develop the strategy, the smart specialization strategy. It could be a requirement, the participation of at least one research university, instead of being 1+, let's say.
What about in the case of Rusa University?
Yes. Thank you. From my point of view, one interesting topic is about the comprehensive set of indicators that you mentioned to enlarge the evaluation of the universities in their regional innovative ecosystem. For example, we have scientific indicators that evaluate the scientific input of the universities in our country, in Bulgaria. Each year, each university has to prepare a report to present it to the Ministry of Education, what kind of scientific results the university achieves according to a set of indicators of the Ministry, of the scientific part. Then we have the innovational strategies, then we have the smart specialization strategies. Maybe one idea is to make the comprehensive list of indicators combining the different approaches of different strategies. And this will give a better and clear picture of the input that the university has for the region. And also, according to your question, how can we use the network of the universities? and the network that the GRC is piloting of those 20 universities. From our point of view, and my personal opinion is that we have now the indicators, they are measuring the results. But before the results, we have to put some effort and some activities. It will be very useful for universities to exchange good practices among different universities in order to crystallize and to define approaches how to apply different instruments, approaches in their activities in order to achieve the results measured afterwards with the indicators. This will be a very good and positive feedback and benefit for the universities.
Koen, do you have any comments on some of this?
Maybe on the last point to start with. So these 20 cases are indeed pieces of material that other universities could learn from. And for that reason, if all the universities agree, we will make these publicly available. We have also been organizing workshops in which we have brought together representatives from all these workshops to learn from each other in the development of these cases. So some efforts have been made, but more efforts perhaps are called for and needed. I think what Professor Grauwe indicated, that universities could play an important role in smart specialization strategies, and perhaps should play and have to play an important role in the strategies, is something that may be reflected also in a new programming period in regional policy. But maybe here I stop and I give the floor back to you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, this lady.
Good afternoon. I come from east of Serbia, and I must say I'm very impressed with what I've heard about Tarragona. I have a personal knowledge because my son is one of your PhD students, international. Thank you for developing such a great university. I didn't know this much. This is really impressive. On the other hand, it was very interesting to hear the experience from Bulgaria, because it is obvious that in Bulgaria, as it is in Serbia, research and innovation and everything what is happening is only in few places. What we know from scientific-based evidence is that universities and science parks, research centers are actually promoters of development of the regions, like in Aalborg in Denmark. So shouldn't we use universities as regional promoters for new technologies and all of that? Shouldn't that be the main incentive for least developed parts of Europe, let's say?
It sounds to me that your message is basically reinforcing what it is a number of universities like the ones we've heard are really trying to do. And one of the things that's been coming to my mind as I listen to the various interventions in this session is maybe the potential power that this network of 20 universities may have in showcasing to maybe a lot more of those universities that might consider themselves to be aloof and beyond some of the things that you're doing, to say, hey, look, this is what you should be doing. And listen to what the experts, like the group of experts, who was it, Pascal Lamy's group of experts, were saying about the underachievement or the under-realization of the potential of universities in Europe in general in having some impact on their respective innovation ecosystems. I think there's potentially a very strong message in bringing together the collective good experiences and good practices that your set of universities can have, because they will listen perhaps a little bit more to a collective message than individual message. But that's just a reaction to what you were saying, and maybe
And a very quick follow-up on that. Of course, it is not just the university which should change and improve. It is a bilateral interaction also with regional, national governments who may involve universities, for example, more in the smart specialization strategies or likewise regional development programs, and in this way stimulate, incentivize and capitalize on the potential that universities have.
And something more, not to forget companies, because without companies, nothing would happen. So national governments and universities are very important players, but the most important player is the regional business, the regional companies. And Russia has very interesting characteristic, because in reality it's in 80 kilometers from Bucharest and more than 380 from Sofia. You see, some characteristics of the regions are also important in order really to put all the elements together and to reach the regional goals. Our smart specialization strategy is national. We have no regional smart specialization strategy. And here is the difference between our example and our colleagues' example. So maybe we will continue going on a regional level, but we need some years to prepare our regional structures and to go down and down.
Francis Xavier?
Following that idea, I think that this strategy has an optimum on dimension, on human and socioeconomical dimension. If you have, let's say, I will take one example, the case of Austria with 8 million people there. There are 8 regions, and each of the regions has its own smart specialization strategy. If there were only one region, then that would be a centralized country. And probably some capacities of the region were not taking profit of that, out of capacities. So the idea of the smart specialization strategy taking place at regional level, I think is a very strong idea and good idea for Europe, implies also some dimension that has been not discussed. What's the optimal dimension for doing that job? And if you look at the nearly 300 regions in Europe that are doing that job, the mean size is something between 1 million and 2 million people. And the minimum will be some thousands, and the maximum would be 10 million. So there is a range of 1,000 between the lowest and and this cannot be possible. It cannot be the same thing in one case and another. So if you, like Catalonia is a country, is a region in Spain that is as big as Austria. And it behaves like a centralized country because it's a single region. What we feel from southern Catalonia is that it should be some decentralization in that, and that will be better for Catalonia. So that's the idea. I think it should be on the scale of Europe.
Yes, let me go back to the public.
Thank you. I'm Mihai Gârțu. I'm Vice Rector for Research and Innovation at Ovidius University of Constanța in Romania. The university is located on the Black Sea coast. I would like to bring a few, I don't really have questions, but I would like to bring some facts about the Romanian cases. In particular, for instance, regarding HE Innovate, the driver for Romanian universities to enroll and to participate in the questionnaire and then in the follow-up was not in fact the government, but the Romanian American Foundation. Out of the about 90 universities, of which about 50 are public and the rest are private in Romania. 20 were selected by the Romanian American Foundation to be funded for two things: to get counseling from Junior Achievement Romania, so that after going through the questionnaire, to be a follow-up and to implement the action plans. So this started in 2015, I think, in the winter, and Ovidius University was part of the program from the very beginning, along with the Politehnica University, for instance, which is our host today, and which probably is the most advanced in this area. And then a year and a half later, the government realized how important this is and started to push for this kind of evaluation for compulsory for all Romanian universities. Another thing that is very important, again by the Romanian American Foundation, together with the Fulbright Commission, they started 3 years ago plan of grants. They sent academics from Romanian universities to University of Rochester, where they were trained for a semester in entrepreneurship. And at the end of the program, an administrator from the same university would spend a week there, so that when the academics comes back, get support from the top administration, so that all that they learned is applied upon their return. And what it happened that the network of such scholars that were educated at the University of Rochester now started an association for entrepreneurship here in Romania. And in fact, they have next week the first conference of entrepreneurship of this network, with the participation of the US ambassador, but also of the top entrepreneurs of Romania. Another good thing, and I'm very grateful for that, Romanian American Foundation keeps funding. They do the follow-up, and then, for instance, they fund the trips, the participation of these scholars into the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers, a conference that is very famous, was in US, in Canada, this year is in Sweden. Speaking about the role of the universities, we have in Constanța, just 2 minutes if I may, we have in Constanța the bad experience of having Norwegian funds for an incubator. The incubator worked as long as the funding was running, and then when the project ended, it died. So Ovidius University, learning from the mistakes of our partners and colleagues, tried to apply using European funds for regional development to set up innovation center, a center for innovation and technology transfer, which would be the first step before an incubator, so that the production of our scholars will eventually be used. We benefited from help from IBM. They have a corporate social responsibility program, and they sent 3 experts that counseled us on setting up that innovation and technology transfer plan. And now coming back again, the role of the university, and to say something nice about the effort of JRC. For the first time, our university, and not just ours, in general, the Romanian universities were more involved in this RIS3 effort for setting up the strategies, particularly the regional development agencies, the local authorities, were more compelled this time to contact all the stakeholders. And this is something that I should thank you, because otherwise they may have continued with other practices. So your push brings authorities, entrepreneurs, local business, universities, research centers together for the first time, I would say. So thank you for that. And regarding the strategy, what I can say is that overall they're fine, they're nice. It's very important that they are regional. We need to have an overall national strategy, but we also need regional strategies. And I come back to what I said at the beginning. Our university, being on the Black Sea, has a totally different set of priorities than one that is in the mountains.
Sure.
And sometimes when you're a small university, Constanța compared to Bucharest or others, your priorities get to be neglected. So it's very important, and thank you again also for this opportunity. And the last thing, there is this Startup Europe University Network, which is based in Spain with very good and very enthusiastic players there that promote entrepreneurship in all European countries and in Romania. I suggest that you write down there because this network is really, really useful. So they may be involved in your plans in the future. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing all that information. I think you've also echoed in your own words several thoughts and ideas that were shared already by the panel, and so I think it serves to just reinforce some of the things that are maybe more generic conclusions, like the involvement of universities from the very beginning, etc., etc. I'm going to bring the session to a close now because we were supposed to finish at 1:15. And just by way of conclusion, just to point out that I noted that clearly the research or the Regional Innovation Impact Assessment Framework is a very useful tool. It's already showing its utility in a number of different ways, and one can expect that going forward, this will be probably built upon more and more. We also have heard of the need, as also mentioned in other sessions, of involving people of all stakeholders in regional smart specialization strategies, and not be presented with this as a fait accompli ex post, but ab initio, get them involved. And I also think it's worth retaining from this session is that there's also a possibility in deriving from this sample of universities that are in this network some good practices that could have maybe a much farther reaching impact and relevance to universities writ large in the whole of Europe. So with that, these are sort of just some concluding messages for me to take away from this session. Let me thank all the panelists for sharing their time and making the effort to come here for this event. And thank you for participating and listening and bearing with us. And with that, let me also thank Koen for doing all the organization of this panel. And with that, I'll close the session. Thank you very much indeed.